Alright, here I am, back again. So, this will be the second part of the book. Well, not part, technically, because they do actually separate this book into parts. But more like the second chapter, even though we're not actually into the chapters yet. And even this part's not a chapter, it's the prologue. But, hey, what you gonna do, right? Let's take a few seconds and, just listen. You hear that? You don't hear that. Do you like what you're not hearing? I like what I'm not hearing. There's no more of that stupid noise in the background. So, yes, that is gone. Sweet. So hopefully that should clear things up a little bit, make it sound a little better. And I gotta figure out how I'm gonna hold the book for a second, because this is, it is so hot in here. One moment here, let me get this all set up. Another thing I want to say is, I'm not exactly sure what accents certain people are supposed to have, honestly. They just say, this guy speaks in that accent, and obviously, I'm not in their world, and I've never heard them speak, so I don't know what accent it is. So, for now, I'm probably not going to use an accent for people. Maybe I'll do something. I don't want to get it wrong and just be weird, and I don't know. So I think I'm probably just not going to. Maybe I'll add a little something, but it's not going to be anything too crazy. So that's just a heads up. Because I don't know. I don't know their accents. So, yep. Wow, it is so hot in here. Alright, now. Let's see. Also, there's a little thing at the beginning of every chapter where it says like a little quote, and then it tells who it's from. So just letting you know that it's going to be, I'll separate that from the actual chapter of the book. But that's just so you're aware, that's what this weird little thing that I'll be reading sometimes is. So yeah, just want to let you know. Alright, Book 1, The Way of Kings. This is 4,500 years later, after the Prelude there. Prologue, To Kill. The love of men is a frigid thing, a mountain stream only 3 steps from the ice. We are his. O Stormfather, we are his. It is but 1,000 days and the Everstorm comes. Collected on the first day of the week of Pala of the month Shash of the year 1171, 31 seconds before death. Subject was a dark-eyed pregnant woman of middle years. The child did not survive. Zeth son Villano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. The white clothing was a Parshendi tradition, foreign to him, but he did as his masters required and did not ask for an explanation. He sat in a large stone room, baked by enormous fire pits that cast a garish light upon the revelers, causing beads of sweat to form on their skin as they danced and drank and yelled and sang and clapped. Some fell to the ground red-faced, the revelry too much for them, their stomachs proving to be inferior wineskins. They looked as if they were dead, at least until their friends carried them out of the feast hall to waiting beds. Zeth did not sway to the drums, drink the sapphire wine, or stand to dance. He sat on a bench at the back, a still servant in white robes. Few at the treaty-signing celebration noticed him. He was just a servant, and Shin were easy to ignore. Most out here in the east thought Zeth's kind were docile and harmless. They were generally right. The drummers began a new rhythm. The beats shook Zeth like a quartet of thumping hearts, pumping waves of invisible blood through the room. Zeth's masters, who were dismissed as savages by those in more civilized kingdoms, sat at their own tables. They were men with skin of black marbled with red. Parshendi they were named, cousins to the more docile servant people known as Parshmen in most of the world. An oddity. They did not call themselves Parshendi. This was the Alethi name for them. They meant roughly Parshmen who can think. Neither side seemed to see that as an insult. The Parshendi had brought the musicians. At first, the Alethi Light Eyes had been hesitant. To them, drums were base instruments of the common dark-eyed people. But wine was the great assassin of both tradition and propriety, and now the Alethi elite danced with abandon. Szeth stood and began to pick his way through the room. The revelry had lasted long. Even the king had retired hours ago, but many still celebrated. As he walked, Szeth was forced to step around Dalinar Kholin, the king's own brother, who slumped drunken at a small table. The aging but powerfully built man kept waving away those who tried to encourage him to bed. Where was Jasnah, the king's daughter? Elhokar, the king's son and heir, sat at the high table, ruling the feast in his father's absence. He was in conversation with two men, a dark-skinned Azish man who had an odd patch of pale skin on his cheek, and a thinner, Alethi-looking man who kept glancing over his shoulder. The heir's feasting companions were unimportant. Szeth stayed far from the heir, skirting the sides of the room, passing the drummers. Music spren zipped through the air around them, the tiny spirits taking the form of spinning translucent ribbons. As Szeth passed the drummers, they noted him. They would withdraw soon, along with all of the other Parshendi. They did not seem offended. They did not seem angry. In that they were going to break their treaty of only a few hours. It made no sense, but Szeth did not ask questions. At the edge of the room, he passed rows of unwavering azure lights that bulged out where wall met floor. They held sapphires infused with stormlight. Profane. How could the men of these lands use something so sacred for mere illumination? Worse, the Alethi scholars were said to be close to creating new shard blades. Szeth hoped that was just wishful boasting, for if it did happen, the world would be changed. Likely in a way that ended with people in all countries, from distant Thelena to towering Jah-Keved, speaking Alethi to their children. They were grand people, these Alethi. Even drunk, there was a natural nobility to them. Tall and well-made, the men dressed in dark silk coats that buttoned down the sides of the chest and were elaborately embroidered in silver or gold. Each one looked a general on the field. The women were even more splendid. They wore grand silk dresses tightly fitted, the bright colors a contrast to the dark tones favored by the men. The left sleeve of each dress was longer than the right one, covering the hand. Alethi had an odd sense of propriety. Their pure black hair was pinned up atop their heads, either in intricate weavings of braids or in loose piles. It was often woven with gold ribbons or ornaments, along with gems that glowed with stormlight. Beautiful. Profane, but beautiful. Szeth left the feasting chamber behind. Just outside, he passed the doorway into the beggar's feast. It was an Alethi tradition, a room where some of the poorest men and women in the city were given a feast complementing that of the king and his guests. A man with a long gray and black beard slumped in the doorway, smiling foolishly. Though whether from wine or a weak mind, Szeth could not tell. "Have you seen me?" the man asked with slurred speech. He laughed, then began to speak in gibberish, reaching for a wineskin. So it was drink after all? Szeth brushed by, continuing past a line of statues depicting the 10 heralds from ancient Vorin theology. Jezerezeh, Ishi, Kelek, Telanalat. He counted off each one and realized there were only 9 here. One was conspicuously missing. Why had Shalash's statue been removed? King Gavilar was said to be very devout in his Vorin worship, too devout by some people's standards. The hallway here curved to the right, running around the perimeter of the domed palace. They were on the king's floor, 2 levels up, surrounded by rock walls, ceiling, and floor. That was profane. Stone was not to be trod upon. What was he to do? He was truthless. He did as his masters demanded. Today, that included wearing white. Loose white trousers tied at the waist with a rope, and over them a filmy shirt with long sleeves, open at the front. White clothing for a killer was a tradition among the Parshendi. Although Szeth had not asked, his masters had explained why. White to be bold, white to not blend into the night, white to give warning. For if you were going to assassinate a man, he was entitled to see you coming. Szeth turned right, taking the hallway directly towards the king's chambers. Torches burned on the walls, their light unsatisfying to him, a meal of thin broth after a long fast. Tiny flame spren danced around them, like insects made solely of congealed light. The torches were useless to him. He reached for his pouch and the spheres it contained, but then hesitated when he saw more of the blue lights ahead. A pair of stormlight lamps hanging on the wall, brilliant sapphires glowing at their hearts. Zeth walked up to one of these, holding out his hand to cup it around the glass-shrouded gemstone. "You there!" a voice called in Alethi. There were 2 guards at the intersection. Double guard, for there were savages abroad in Kholinar this night. True, those savages were supposed to be allies now, but alliances could be shallow things indeed. This one wouldn't last the hour. Zeth looked as the 2 guards approached. They carried spears. They weren't light eyes, and were therefore forbidden the sword. Their painted red breastplates were ornate, however, as were their helms. They might be dark-eyed, but they were high-ranking citizens with honored positions in the royal guard. Stopping a few feet away, the guard at the front gestured with his spear. "Go on now. This is no place for you." He had tan Alethi skin and a thin mustache that ran all the way around his mouth, becoming a beard at the bottom. Zeth didn't move. "Well," the guard said, "what are you waiting for?" Zeth breathed in deeply, drawing forth the stormlight. It streamed into him, siphoned from the twin sapphire lamps on the walls, sucked in as if by his deep inhalation. The stormlight raged inside of him, and the hallway suddenly grew darker, falling into shade like a hilltop cut off from the sun by a transient cloud. Zeth could feel the light's warmth, its fury, like a tempest that had been injected directly into his veins. The power of it was invigorating but dangerous. It pushed him to act, to move, to strike. Holding his breath, he clung to the stormlight. He could still feel it leaking out. Stormlight could be held for only a short time, a few minutes at most. It leaked away, the human body too porous a container. He had heard that the Voidbringers could hold it in perfectly. But then, did they even exist? His punishment declared that they didn't. His honor demanded that they did. Afire with holy energy, Zeth turned to the guards. They could see that he was leaking stormlight, wisps of it curling from his skin like luminescent smoke. The lead guard squinted, frowning. Zeth was sure the man had never seen anything like it before. As far as he knew, Zeth had killed every stonewalker who had ever seen what he could do. What are you?" The guard's voice had lost its certainty. "Spirit or man?" "What am I?" Zeth whispered, a bit of light leaking from his lips as he looked past the man down the long hallway. Sorry." Alright, there's gonna be another part. It'll be like right after this. I'll link another video to it, because this video is getting a little too long. And, yeah, you can continue from there.